Canada has the luxury, since essentially its creation, to be isolated from the world. We sit on top of the United States. No one really tried to immigrate here for big reasons, except just wanting a better life. We became really comfortable here, and we're not touched by the world's troubles. And then everything changed.
There has been a veritable flood of newcomers, far beyond the capacity of the country to absorb, which the Prime Minister himself has admitted. The biggest concern is the horrendous mismatch between the level of population and the amount of services available, including infrastructure, jobs, healthcare, housing.
The eroding support for immigration in a country that does depend on it and has been built on it since our earliest days. Fewer than half of Canadians now support immigration. And this is because the government, over a period of 2 years, just 2 years, processed 5 million applications.
A small coterie of individuals or tiny constituencies hijacked the immigration policy, and then they just threw the floodgates open. If we bring in 1 million people a year, where are they going to live? Nobody thought about how this is going to affect the Canadian society. The post-secondary education sector, the immigration consultants, the so-called investors in real estate, more popularly known as slumlords, hijacked this policy, and then there was no check on it. One of the major events in hijacking the policy was Motion M44. This Motion M44, and I have to emphasize this, passed with unanimous vote of 324 to 0, where it asked the government to create permanent residency pathways for temporary foreign workers, including international students. When there is a bill in Parliament, then there is a lot of coverage of it. You will see talking heads on TV and politicians giving their opinions. But motions are basically hidden somewhere, nobody pays much attention. So now an associated point is that international students were being seen primarily as temporary foreign workers, not as students. And then you saw the growth of all these sham colleges, one operating above a massage parlor. There were reportedly 80 colleges in Brampton alone. The excuse was there were severe labor shortages after the COVID restrictions were lifted. If there was such an acute labor shortage, where did the workforce go?
Canada education industry has been attracting a lot of international students, and the motivation for the recruiters is the huge commission. We're looking at anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 as commission for every successful admission, $4,000, $5,000 for a Canadian national versus almost $18,000 to $20,000 now for 2 semesters for international students. So this is a game of big numbers.
I moved first to Brampton in 2005 with my family, and I started noticing a change in 2020 during COVID. So there was this trend that started happening. If a house went up for sale, it was an investor that purchased it. And automatically, within a few weeks, we would have what we call rooming house. So all of a sudden now, international students, and I'm not kidding you, we're looking at 20 plus students living in a 1,500 square foot home.
There is another part of the narrative which says that for international students are subsidizing Canadian students' post-secondary education. Now, there are several fundamental questions here. Number one is, are we that poor? Family of very modest means in rural parts of India selling off their small piece of land to send one kid here, and that money is only enough for the first term's fees. So when the kid lands here, then their first priority is to land 2 or 3 jobs. Are these the people who we want subsidizing our children's education? Secondly, are we going to cause a situation where the international students are forced to live in subhuman conditions in order for our children's education to be subsidized? The United Nations has called this temporary foreign worker program contemporary form of slavery.
at least once or twice every month, we receive inquiries where people say, we came on a study permit, we have exhausted our work permit. We even got the extension for 18 months. Many students, they got 3 years plus 18 months, 4.5 years of work permits. Even that is expired and their points are not reaching the threshold level that is hovering right now for inviting permanent residents. What do we do? And typically the answer is either improve your language score, or if you don't have foreign work experience, probably best to return to your country. You have to accept what the current economic scenario is, be the first one to increase your points and then come back. Not many people want to do that because just the whole idea of returning to their home country is considered to be a failure.
A lot of the international students coming in, they went all out and they're dressing up and they're honking the horns or making a wreck of the malls. Look at what happened at the Diwali. A couple of municipalities, Brampton and Mississauga, had to cancel the fireworks, which is unheard of. There are international students who were making videos, putting on social media, how to collect food, how to get free food from free donation centers.
To study in Canada, you must prove that you have the funding to support yourself. If they're going to multiple food banks and they're hitting up the churches, this is now a matter of abuse.
Another food bank in the area says it never turns international students away. But the man who runs it is giving those that do the benefit of the doubt, saying they may be misinformed and trying to protect their supply. But he says something needs to change because they're seeing an influx of international students too.
On a weekly basis, we have 150 kids. It is challenging.
We're seeing reports that tens of thousands of people never even bothered showing up to school. So you can tell that they do not want to immigrate here to get education. People paying for jobs, people paying for student visas, which is highly illegal. And the government hasn't gone after a single one of those people into whole ecosystem of illegal migration to Canada.
I have seen how these lavish events happen in India and other countries as well. So you've got a big banquet hall full of international student recruiters from colleges with these beautiful prospectus and showing them the dream that you come to Canada, you get a work permit, and eventually you'll be able to apply for PR. A lot of students, unless they are really career oriented, are looking at the minimum education requirement for how to get in. So it's not an accident, it's not a happenstance that these students ended up on Canada's shores. They were vetted through the international student program that Canada runs, and large number of commissions, whether in terms of student recruitment, whether in terms of the fees they paid to the government, the GICs and all that. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Finished my PhD studies in 2011, and I began my first career as a post-secondary instructor, so university professor, but I taught a lot at 2-year colleges, at small colleges and big universities like UBC and SFU. I got to see a great number of different institutions, different students, different environments, different perspectives, different instructors, faculty, staff. I taught for 14 years. So both types of institutions. The 4-year degree granting universities, about international students. They were wonderful, very keen, very motivated, well prepared. They knew why they had come. Many of them really enjoyed their experience in Canada and wanted to stay here and to make a life here. I was very well pleased with the quality of the students and their motivations and their interest and their preparedness for academic studies. At the 2-year colleges, I only taught at private institutions, so not public. And that's a little more problematic.
There are a lot of high school students in my area. I've talked to parents and their kids can't get a part-time job.
Canadians are frustrated because youth unemployment in Canada is double digits. It's some of the highest it's been in decades. So their kids go to Tim Hortons, McDonald's, where kids used to work. And now there is only people working of one race. And they will not hire a white Canadian kid anymore. So how should those people feel? Where is the racism occurring, on whose side? The people that can't get a job because they're white, or to people that are not hiring anyone else but their own culture. So that's a double-edged sword that we have to ask ourselves, and we need to talk honestly about it.
People say these immigrants came in and they are taking away the jobs, in my opinion. No one signed up for that. I spoke to a few students. They said, I wanted to be a dentist in India, or I wanted to be a doctor, or I had these thoughts in mind. And they were just sold the pipe dream. So when those guys are here, they still have to survive. They end up working in these kind of jobs. And when the walls are closing in, you're seeing these protests. But the system is the one that enabled all this cycle of exploitation.
At nighttime, the blinds will be open and you're going to see mattresses covered on the wall. You'll see suitcases stacked really high. And my heart did go out to a lot of them because I thought they were being exploited. But that's changed over the past few years. I do realize that there are some good students that are here, but I feel as though the ones that I've been seeing on a day-to-day basis, they're just taking advantage of the situation.
In 2015, when the express entry system came into being, I don't have the exact number, they did almost 25,000 people as permanent residents from January 2015 to December 2015. Now, on 13th of February 2021, 27,332 people were given the invitation to apply in a single day. Yes, behind the scenes, COVID was going on, and Canada needed immigrants, so they thought people who are already here paying taxes, let's just get them PRs. Whatever the thought process behind was, they opened a new PR program, TR to PR, or temporary residence to permanent residence. Total program intake was almost 100,000. Out of that, 40,000 were international students. That program came, and the eligibility requirement to qualify for PR was, and I quote, if you have completed 2 years of education in Canada, any diploma, even 1 year program plus 1 year program, doesn't matter. If you had the minimum IELTS requirement, I think it was CLB5, which is preposterous, which is extremely, extremely low, and if you had a job, apply for PR immediately. What this program did was, it looked like a target for a lot of international students that, hey, getting PR is that easy in Canada. And what followed was tons of immigration applications submitted. And from 2021 to 2023, we have seen the highest number of international student approvals.
There's protests in which international students, in other words, foreign nationals, are gathered and they are demanding that their postgraduate work permits be extended. You cannot make demands on a sovereign nation if you are a foreign national. The 7% of the population who are temporary residents, international students, foreign workers, asylum seekers, they are not Canadians. And that's frequently forgotten in our current discussions, especially when there is a sense that the nation owes them citizenship, they owe them permanent residency, they owe them an extension to their visa.
I remember the immigration minister of that time, Mr. Marco Mendicino, had done a press release, which is still on Canada's website. It says, if you are an international student in Canada, we have a message for you. We want you to stay. And that headline got picked up and it became a part of the mass marketing campaigns in Asia that, hey, look at the immigration minister saying that we want you in Canada. Coming to the point, connecting the dots, the protesters are saying we were promised something. Government says we never promised you anything, but it was an implied kind of a promise that the bar has been set so low that anyone with a pulse, anyone with a heartbeat can immigrate to Canada.
I never really had this concern at the university level. When I taught at the college level, and I could hear a lot of students who were very keen on getting permanent residency. I could see a lot of cheating, plagiarism. It was quite rife, unfortunately. It was very, very common. And therefore, what I would do is interview a lot of the students on the quality of their work. Where did you do your research? Can you find your sources for me? For sure that many of them could not do it. The issue that we had, at least at the college level, I rarely had this problem at the university level, so I'm not always sure what they did that was different from the colleges. a lot of instructors when I was teaching that we desperately wanted the students to have some sort of English remedial course or like a pre-university course to help them get Canadian standards in terms of sort of academic writing or language ability, just to get them up to speed. There was a lot of interest, at least among the instructors. We thought this would very much help students who were clearly struggling. The students didn't want to take those courses because they're not worth any credits. So you're spending money for a course that offers nothing to your diploma, even though it didn't work out in the long end. In other words, if you keep failing courses because you don't have the language ability, well, it doesn't matter. You're just throwing money away anyway.
Foreign students have become the backbone of the budgets of universities all over this country. Some of the programs in particular, I'm thinking of STEM programs, they're very competitive. The result is that we have more international students than Canadian students in many of these programs. One student had almost, I think it was average was almost 100 in Toronto in the public system. If it's a Canadian school, I didn't give priority to Canadian students who have the grades, even if other students have them somewhere else. But the point is those other students pay more. So universities have embraced that, and to the point, though, that some schools were created, they're not even schools. They're just on paper.
An international student, the entire purpose of it was to experience another culture. They're just setting up their culture here, and they're not learning about Canadian values, and they're not learning about us, and they're not respecting our values and our standards of living.
People started talking about how can we stay here and how can we continue working legally. That's where the asylum program started being exploited. We are talking about Canada is facing asylum application crisis. It was going to happen. Someone comes along and says, hey, probably if you applied for asylum, the government does allow you to work. So at least for 5 years, you're going to continue working. Meanwhile, figure out if you can find a Canadian person to get married to and then sponsor yourself through PR. Along came a few people. They didn't have any malicious intent from that conversation. They were just looking at exploring more options because people at this stage are desperate. They actually came and very naively asked that, so what if we go and stand in referendums for the Khalistan movement, and we say that we are Khalistan supporters and we fear persecution if we return back to India? Can we still get asylum? We asked them, where is this question coming from? They said that a lot of students, a lot of friends, a lot of people whom they interact with, they were given this alibi. And that would be a part of BOC, basis of claim, that we would show that if you return to your country, you would be at the fear of persecution. Even the Prime Minister Trudeau's statements when they blamed India, that acted as a trigger for a lot of asylum applications. I have seen those personally. It is a mad rush that let's apply for asylum, let's do it before they change anything. The same thing happened with the LMI, I think. These things should have been audited by the government, and preemptive measures should have been taken rather than corrective measures. The thing is, they're not even taking corrective measures. Now, I don't work with the government. I don't audit these institutes, and the private college business model itself works on promising 50 to 60%, sometimes even of commission to the recruiting agents, because they are sold not just a pipe dream, they're sold a package deal that we are going to be responsible for whatever documents you need to apply for a study permit and to receive the study permit. That's the underbelly of international student recruitment, especially when it comes to private colleges.
When you're bringing so many from one part of the world, many of them were not sort of prepared for Canadian academic standards, linguistically or academic research. It was certainly a big concern that this could lead to a lot of racism against those students.
You brought in a ton of people who were sold a dream by their agents. Now, there are 1 million plus students who were waiting for the same miracle. We'll study for 2 years. We'll get the 3 years work permit. Oh, you're not able to get PR within these 3 years? Because COVID, people had lost a lot of jobs. Okay, we'll give you 1.5 years of work permit extension also. So now what happens? We don't want to leave. Many of them have lied to their family. Oh yeah, I have gotten the permanent residence. This was more than a $40 billion industry. Even right now, they are being taken advantage of. They're literally being dangled a carrot. Obviously, I don't advise anyone to live here illegally. You can't buy a car. You can't even go to the hospital. You're not covered by health insurance. What's this life? That is a life full of slavery.
Under Harper, one of the restrictions was that they removed the ability for international students while they were studying to count those years of study as part of their physical residency requirement for citizenship, that disincentivized students from coming here solely for the purpose of citizenship. Almost as soon as the Trudeau government came in, they reversed that. One of the major pull factors in the international student programs that you can come here for citizenship. The second pull factor is work. It is being used as an accessory foreign worker program for people who maybe can't qualify for the actual foreign worker program, who don't have the skills necessary to qualify for the just applying as an economic immigrant under the permanent residency stream. So they are using it as a back door.
How do the study permit applications happen? They applied for study permits by taking admissions into the colleges and universities, and even schools for that matter, that were able to host international students. So how can an institute host international students? They have to take the status of a DLI, Designated Learning Institute. So if you're an international student applying for a study permit, you have to be enrolled at a DLI. Majority of DLIs that we talk about are the institutes that are publicly funded. They can be universities, private universities, public colleges, and there are private colleges as well. Some private colleges, they signed an articulation agreement with certain public colleges. They basically acted as satellite campuses, game of sheer numbers. But then there was a category of a lot of private colleges also hosting international students. Now bear in mind, across Canada, if you're studying at a private college, the graduate is not eligible for a postgraduate work permit unless there's a private college which is giving you a bachelor's degree. There'll hardly be one or two colleges across Canada that fit this bill. Quebec used to be an exception, but over the last couple of years, that exception is also gone. More than 1,000 DLIs exist in Canada right now. I would imagine more than 80% of them got their DLI status after 2017, 2018. In a country like Canada, which has more colleges than universities, and all of a sudden to have more than 1,000 DLIs with the reins to host international students, to target international students, that is unheard of. The ISP program, or the International Student Recruitment Program, is managed by provinces. So any college, any institute looking to apply for a DLI status, they have to apply for the licensing from the provincial government. When you are having more than 1,000 odd colleges to audit and to manage, there are going to be cracks, there are going to be leaks. I think we can talk about correlation here.
When you look into any policy, you should look into who does it benefit, who is pushing it, what are the lobbies and organizations associated with it. And I kept seeing this name, Century Initiative. The Century Initiative is a registered lobby, and they have the explicit goal of growing Canada's population to 100 million by 2100. We are in 2025. We have a population of 41.5 million roughly. That would mean adding 60 million people to this country in the space of 75 years.
So housing has really turned into investments for slumlord. Bungalow or back split is like number one on their list. It's just easier to divide into units. And they get their permits to build safe housing. And then after that, that's how they shove all the people in it. So there's no accountability for after.
This is the Wild West in Brampton, and there's absolutely no rules and no consequences. And even when there are consequences, it's the cost of doing business.
Many residents we spoke to say that unscrupulous homeowners are bending, if not breaking the rules, and that residents are the ones left to monitor what's going on when that should be the responsibility of Brampton city staff.
It's amazing to see how fast a house could depreciate and just fall apart when you're not looking after it. For the first time, we now have a rat issue. It's pretty constant where I'm picking up bodies of dead rats or mice on my property. It has to do with the garbage overflowing. When you have so many people living in such a small place, and they don't all the times have access to a kitchen, so they get a lot of takeout. My parents also live in Brampton. They're retired and their mortgage is paid for, but now they're in a situation where their area really went downhill quickly, so the value of their homes depreciated. And where are they going to go? They're going to sell their home at a low value. There's no place to go, even outside of GTA, that they're going to be able to buy a house without taking on a mortgage. There's not one single street in Brampton that hasn't been impacted by these illegal rooming houses. It's also very disheartening because as this is happening, we're having a housing crisis. Currently, there's over 60 encampments along Etobicoke Creek with Canadians that can't find housing. And it bothers me because these investors are targeting a certain demographic. They're not opening up these houses for Canadians that need homes. They're open about it. You go on Marketplace, 1 room, 2 double beds, looking for 2 Punjabi girls for each bed. There's a double standard. I don't think anyone else would be able to get away with that advertising.
Here in BC, about 2 in 5 people do not have a family doctor. Housing is increasingly out of reach, not only owning a single family home, but even renting. It also has spillover effects on the entire province because when there's such heavy population growth in the main cities, people essentially flee and they disperse out into the small towns. It's very palpable how this is contributing to a decline in our everyday life.
Our government needs to spend billions of dollars building affordable houses, which it didn't really need to do because houses were more affordable. More people were able to use market economics, get a job, save up, and the house prices weren't hyperinflated because the demand side. We just can't build enough houses. Very simple equation. Created an unsustainable bubble.
They're illegal rooming houses. It's like sardines in a can. When you have a rooming house done properly and it's registered as a rooming house, you have 4 people living in it. Each person has their personal space. There's not an issue with that. There is definitely lots of community groups within Brampton that have kind of come together to fight this. We've had countless town hall meetings. We've done petitions, delegations at City Hall. The area that my husband and I chose to raise our family, it's very family oriented, very working class. You just have a lot of teachers here, a lot of police officers, firefighters. We have such a great sense of community. And with this sudden and very inorganic change, it just kind of happened overnight. I can't go out anywhere without someone talking about rooming houses and how much they hate Brampton and how much they want to leave Brampton.
The Century Initiative have played a major role in the mass immigration policy. 2 of their co-founders, Dominic Barton and Mark Wiseman, served on Trudeau's Economic Advisory Council. That council delivered one of the first recommendations to the Trudeau government that immigration permanent resident levels be raised dramatically. And I started looking into the Century Initiative, in particular their funding. And what I found, it's all in their official reports on their website. And I wondered, is it going to be some radical left-wing organizations, maybe really, really in favor of multiculturalism? They want to really expand our population and they have some sort of ideological motivation. No, the business community in Canada has a significant role in the Century Initiative. I looked into their funding. CIBC, TD Bank, BMO, the Business Council of Canada, AGT Food and Ingredients. And I just kept going down the list, and it was the corporate and business world in Canada which was funding the Century Initiative. And that's based on 2 financial reports that I investigated, public information on their website. And I started wondering, why? Why would the business interests in Canada be funding the Century Initiative? Well, the banks benefit when the population grows astronomically because it means more and more mortgages and higher mortgage rates. The Business Council of Canada, other business interests, they benefit because our GDP expands. the total economic activity in the country expands. The GDP per capita, the measure of wealth per person, will decline with massive population growth and unskilled immigration, but the total GDP is what the corporate world is concerned about. I realized that a significant underreported element of Canada's immigration policy is the corporate and business interests that benefit from the same population growth that is making all of our lives as ordinary citizens difficult. What would a country of 100 million look like? The Century Initiative has actually planned that out. In one of their reports, they have this concept called mega regions. And so Vancouver would be about 12 million people. Montreal would be about 12 million. Ottawa would be about 5 million. And Toronto would be 33 million people, which is almost our entire population at the moment. Calgary, Edmonton, it would have something like 15.5 million people. And so just imagine the scale of development, the scale of endless house building, the gobbling up of our farmland, the steamrolling of our environment, the massive cutting of trees for subdivisions, the densification of our cities. If you think about it, the Century Initiative's project would mean that Canada would be transformed into a giant strip mall from Vancouver Island right across to the Maritimes. It's not the kind of country that I want to live in.
So we didn't bring in high-value consumerism. We just brought short-term demand onto market, and that inflated it artificially. Now we're paying a price for it. Local municipalities have to invest billions more to sustain new infrastructure. We didn't build enough hospitals in the last 10 years for less people in Canada, never mind adding another 5 million people into Canada. The big problem is on the other side of it is those are not highly productive jobs they're coming here to do. Besides the criminal aspect cost of it that we're seeing in Canada, the auto theft industry is now over $1 billion. We have massive drug labs being busted almost weekly now in Canada. 30% of our trucking industry is black market now.
CBC expose, and I wish they did more of this kind of expose. It was real journalism. They went to one of these essentially fake driving schools where they do not give the prospective drivers proper lessons. So they're essentially setting them up so that they will pass the test, but they will not be prepared for a Canadian winter road.
There's a lot of anger and resentment. We've reached out to our city councillors, we reached out to our mayor, and they're on our side. We even had a rally back in September. Now, we had over 500 residents go to City Hall asking them to stop the basement apartments. I don't feel safe in my community. I don't want to raise my kids here. So we are in the process of moving. It's very sad to see these communities just decaying at a rapid rate. And a lot of it has to do with the people that are living in the rooming houses. I wake up listening to very loud music, the bass pumping in. You could hear the mufflers rattle in my house. There is a number of people that live in it. One, it's like a rotating door. So you have different tenants. You never get to know who your neighbors are because they're constantly in and out. But I did notice something interesting with young men that are apparently students. And I'm saying students because I don't think they are. It seems like they have adopted this gangster culture. And the reason why I'm saying that is because they do express it. They express it on their cars. I definitely see it with the windows are all tinted black on the front and even on the windshield. And I don't feel safe when I'm walking my kids. I can't see them. I can't make eye contact. I don't understand why the Peel Police is not enforcing removing those tints. It's absolutely crazy.
We're talking about students only, but there is a huge fraud that's happening from different countries. I had clients from different Asian countries, Vietnam, from Australia, who have come to Canada through these documentation. There are people who are here selling off their homes, selling off their lands, their assets. They are here with their families. Can't you help us make some documentation? Tell them that's not how stuff works. And that's the first time that they feel that they have hit the wall, because so far they were sold a dream that as long as you have money to spend, there is someone there to make your documentation and get you over the line. That's the kind of precedent that Canada has set in.
I would say calling India or Southeast Asia, which is a huge part of the world, under one umbrella is really unfair because that demographic has moved from essentially one part of India, and the concentration of a lot of those crime and statistics comes from one part of India.
We are seeing the formation of cultural enclaves in Canada. They permit the entry of transnational gangs as well as foreign interference directly onto Canadian soil.
There are groups in our society who are fighting each other on the basis of racism or religious hatred. It's not just racism of white people to non-whites. It's absurd. When you come to Canada, you should leave your issues at the door, at the airport.
Canadian society has created an environment where now there are pockets that people can go to, and they feel that they don't need to understand the broader Canadian society.
My views are very mainstream in Quebec because Quebec actively promotes Quebec nationalism. Quebecers believe in asserting the dominance of their culture. You are expected to adapt, learn the language, and there's very little tolerance for shenanigans. But even in Quebec, you still see the problems because of the ghettoization of immigrants that go into enclaves. And there was a problem in a school where there were teachers who were reporting these. They called them Maghrebi in the French press. And so they were taking over a school and fundamentalists, and they were intimidating the other teachers, and they were teaching the children like an Islamist curriculum. This went on for years and years with many complaints before anything happened. And then for whatever reason, recently it's broken into the mainstream and then it was shut down. But Quebecers will have these conversations. I have people assaulting me in the streets who have no interest in Canadian culture. They hate it here. They hate Canadians. And they're not here to contribute and to build. I don't think that means that people should antagonize or be nasty to minority groups. I don't think that means that minority groups shouldn't have protected rights. But I don't think that you can have a nation without a uniting culture.
82% of recent immigrants who had came here within the last 10 years thought that immigration was set at a level that was unsustainable. Another poll in which 62% of foreign-born Canadians and 67% of native-born Canadians felt that immigration was too high. That's a very, very small gap between those two groups.
I've definitely talked to police officers, and they're very frustrated because there is an increase to crime, and it is related to the immigration. It's easy to see because you could just go on social media or even watch the news of who's getting arrested, and you see the names, and you hear, oh, this was an international student or a temporary worker that came here. It's kind of easy to connect the dots.
We have corrupted the Canadian system. Immigrants have corrupted the Canadian system. We never had pictures on our health card. Never. Why do we have pictures? So who's to blame? I remember the older generation coming in, claiming welfare. So if I sponsor my dad, and that's my responsibility to take care of him. All my parents had to do was go to the government. Oh, my son doesn't take care of me. I don't have enough money to eat. I don't have enough money to spend. And the Canadian government would say, no. We have to take care of our older people. Mr. Justin Trudeau had to step aside because a lot of Canadians felt that he let in too many international students. He let in too many immigrants. But I think you will feel his mark on Canada in about 30 years. A lot of the bad apples are taking advantage and giving every immigrant a bad name.
The problem we have in discussing it is if you come out and say, yes, there is a link between mass, uncontrolled immigration and gang crime. Yes, there is a link between mass, uncontrolled immigration and the trucking disasters we're seeing on our roads and the fraud in the trucking industry. We're only going to be able to solve these problems when we have an honest conversation about it in the public sphere without fear of being called a racist.
There's a male murderer of a toddler. He drowned to death a toddler, and he also raped an infant, a baby, to the point where the baby almost died and was airlifted for surgery. And this male, this violent, evil man, is in a female prison because he identifies as female. And the conservatives voted for gender identity to be put into the human rights codes. They are trapped with this enormous male psychopath. He's already beaten one of them so badly that he broke her ribs. Like, I just can't even believe it. This is not the country that I grew up in. This is not a country I feel a level of attachment to anymore. I feel a level of attachment to my memory of the country.
There was this case in Alberta where an international student was charged and found guilty of sexual assault on a young lady at a bar. And the judge gave him less than 6 months of jail sentence so that he doesn't get deported. Why is it so vitally important to keep this individual in Canada at the cost of the dignity of a lady's modesty? Why has immigration status of temporary residents in Canada become so exalted that the lives and dignity of Canadians is not even a second priority? It is not a priority at all.
They're saying that this has become a haven for the criminal. Now, we're getting criminals from across the border, for example. I know Mr. Trump doesn't agree with us, probably. We had a big problem, guns being smuggled from states.
Since Mulroney, which deviated away from the tap-on, tap-off system, is responsible for the current problem. The Trudeau government is responsible for the explosive population growth we have seen in the last years since the pandemic. The Trudeau government has essentially initiated these racial problems and these divisions among Canadians. All of this strife is the fault of an immigration policy which has opened the doors to low-skill, cheap labor immigration, extensive fraud like we have never seen before.
With critical mass of anything, it changes its environment. And there are whole places in Canada now you don't need to speak English. There are whole places in Canada now you can't campaign in politics in English.
We have a huge Muslim population in Quebec and very different immigration patterns than the rest of Canada. That's why I speak specifically about Islam, Islamism, and the issues that are arising from those immigrant groups. And people in the rest of Canada, depending on their location, may have other challenges in terms of immigrants integrating or not integrating.
In some sense, I don't blame the people who gravitate to their own language, to their own culture. However, it is up to the government to set the immigration numbers at such a level at which enclaves will not form. You see the same thing in France, in England, you see it in Scandinavia, and the other element besides the numbers is that we are not encouraging assimilation anymore.
What we define as multiculturalism is the refusal to blend in. If I don't blend in, then I am seen as a minority. And if I am either trying or able to blend in, then I am seen as an Uncle Tom.
When we have those bad actors that come in, when they fail to integrate into the society and they want to maintain their sort of quote unquote bad habits, this is when I start looking at this stuff and I'm like, what are you guys doing? Why are you doing this?
Depending on one particular region of one particular country, and then bringing in hundreds of thousands of people from there who are first of all very young. So they don't have the life experiences, including at work. They don't have knowledge of either English or French. So language barrier is a huge deal, because then it stops your interaction with everybody outside of your linguistic group. They are among themselves, and then their behavior reinforces. There is no outside influence coming in. So all those factors have given us a multiculturalism which was already a wrong concept and then twisted that into something that is actually harmful to everybody, including the newcomers.
Some cultures are a lot more amenable to adaptation than others. And I think that part of the reason why it's so difficult to have a conversation about immigration with Canadians is because they're so squeamish about comparing, say, a Muslim from India versus a Hindu from India versus a Sikh from India. These are all different groups of people with different cultural habits and attitudes, and the discrepancies matter. But when you're framing it as multiculturalism, one culture is as good as the next, we legally can't really differentiate. We're not allowed to distinguish. And anytime I try and bring this up on Twitter, I have majority white people ranting about racism. And I can guarantee that these are not people who live in communities with new arrivals. They live in cushy communities. They are not exposed to the realities of mass importing the criminal underclass from failed nation states into Canada. And if I bring up problems that are specific to being female in dealing with bringing men in from countries that have literally no respect for women whatsoever, I'm also called a racist.
For decades, there had been this automatic defense that had been built to shut down any criticism of immigration. If you say anything against high immigration, no matter how high it went, you were basically a racist if you happen to be white. And if you were not white, then you wanted to pull the ladder up behind.
With the immigration and with the rise in the amount of Indians that have come, now we have this anti-Indian hate, which unfortunately is actually anti-Hindu hate that is rising because no one really has any answers on how to address this.
There is now this stereotype towards Indian people. I can't help but notice, I see the comments on social media, I see the racist takes. I'm absolutely disgusted by it.
We are seeing a huge number of people working in certain sectors, whether it's food service, they're not able to take orders properly. People have started talking about boycotting certain businesses and so forth. There's a lot of resentment. There's a lot of hatred.
Replacing one monoculture with another monoculture cannot be called multiculturalism. So, because of that, reaction is going to be stronger, and it is going to come from a wider range of people who are not necessarily racist.
What outreach was done from our end, knowing that we have been in this country for so long, and I think this is where, as a community, what is our responsibility? Because from someone on the outside looking in, they look at me and they look at someone that is newly arrived, and quite frankly, they're not going to know the difference. This doesn't mean that these people are racist.
The whole issue of racial consciousness and racism and cancel culture has been with us well over a decade now. It's the roots of the so-called woke movement, where people were awake to prejudice, awake to racism. They were woke, as they call themselves, but then they started canceling out anyone who said anything they disagreed with. And that could go as far as simply making any kind of comment, even a positive comment about somebody, the way someone looks, for example. It's like to say to a black person, "Oh, I like your hair," can be construed as a microaggression and racism. It does make people walk on eggshells, and racism goes underground. What I fear is that people who self-censor in public, they don't say things, but behind closed doors, let me tell you, they say things.
This is my, in general, worry with this free speech absolutism, and which I think is something that the Western world will die on. Is we don't know if we're talking to bots. Anyone can create an account, including millions of bots online, and that gives social reinforcement to specific ideas. One of the most unfortunate things about social media in general is it conditions people, and it conditions people with attention and likes. And when people start seeing the reinforcement that I do this, I got a lot of likes. Oh, I get monetized now. I get paid to post insulting images of, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, whatever. It becomes an echo chamber of hate that just kind of pats itself on the back.
It's a very bad situation, and the hostilities, I think, are going to increase if people don't start having honest conversations, because we really need to reverse the course on that.
We have a government in power that's never really thought much of Canada and Canada as a culture. And especially in Canada, where we're already divided between Quebec and the rest of the country. So we already have a cultural division between language. There's a hierarchy system built into it. And it's creating red tape, but also other preferential treatments within our politics and business system as it is. Now, the type of people that have been using that to migrate under student visa scams are not the same people that are wanting to immigrate for better life. They're educated. Like when we immigrated to Canada, we had to pass health tests, education tests, everything. And none of that is required anymore. So that mindset and culture that comes with it is what creates all this risk and headaches in Canada, because once they try to cut one way in, now you have people that have no interest in being a legal, lawful citizen. They broke the first rule of being a Canadian.
And coming on the heels of the pandemic, the idea was to make up for labor force shortages because people were not returning to certain jobs, particularly in the retail and manufacturing sectors. But what it did was put massive pressure on housing stock and an economy that was struggling to recover from the pandemic.
The Indian population's like student suicide is huge and nobody really talks about it. It's really unfortunate.
So while we are busy apologizing for all the wrong things that were done in Canada's past, we are committing similar or worse things for which future generations will apologize.
So the accumulation of this has been disastrous for support for immigration. And this is coupled with, right now, a sense that we've lost our identity as a country. People don't really know what we stand for. And that's another dynamic that's been playing out even before immigration ramped up, which is the denigration of our history, whether it's figures like Johnny MacDonald who are decried as racist, whether it's constant talk about colonization, decolonization, wrongs that were done to Indigenous people, which we can't deny they were wrongs done. You couple that sense of a lack of pride of country, plus a whole big number of people coming in at once, and now the threat south of the border to Canada saying, you know, we will make you the 51st state. I think Canadians are looking at each other and going, how did we get here? So we're facing a perfect storm right now.